20% soldiers. The men and women of the National Guard are civilian soldiers. They're our neighbors, our colleagues, our friends. And yet when duty calls, they answer the call. So what is life like in the National Guard, both for our servicemen and women and for their families? Susan and Kevin Dellicker wrote a book to address those questions, and tonight they join us here on set to break down those questions and so much more. That's all coming up right here, right now. My name is Sam Chen, and this is Face the Issues. Good evening and welcome to Face the Issues. I'm Sam Chen. The men and women of the National Guard, they're our neighbors, our friends, members of our community. And yet, when duty calls, they answer that call. They're also members of our armed forces. So what is life like as a civilian soldier? What is it like for the men and women who answer that call, but also for their families? Susan and Kevin Dellicker wrote the book 20% Soldiers, Our Secret Life in the National Guard, and they join me tonight to talk about what that life is like. Susan, Kevin, welcome to Face the Issues.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us, Sam.
It's good to be here, and just so our viewers know, full disclosure, Kevin, you and I work together, but we're not here to discuss any of that here tonight. We want to discuss your book. The book is 20% Soldiers, Our Secret Life in the National Guard. You can get it online. You can get it on Amazon, which is where I got this copy. Let me just start by asking, why write this book? And Susan, let's start with you.
The first reason we wrote the book was actually for our children. We wanted them to know what their life was like as young children.
Kevin?
My father wrote a book, and he was a pilot in Vietnam and had all these adventure stories and wrote this very exciting account of his life in Vietnam, really for us and for the grandkids. And I talked to Susan about a book about my experiences overseas, and she said, well, you know, one of the things that hasn't been done is a really strong account of what it's like not just to be in the Guard and to go back and forth between military and civilian life, but also how it affects the family. So it was really her idea, and I thought it was a good idea, and that's when we ended up doing it.
Yeah, I've heard you speak about the book, Kevin, before at events, and you always say, well, Susan wrote the book, and I threw my name on it along with it. But it is a book written by both of you, and as you read the book, you can see who wrote what portions. I want to start, Kevin, with this question for you, because you talked about National Guard, and in the intro, we talked about civilian soldiers. Yeah, I think most Americans and our viewers who watch this, sure, they know what the Guard, they've heard of the Guard. They don't really know what the National Guard is. How is it different from reserves? How is it different from active duty military? Can you explain what the Guard is?
Absolutely. So one of the main reasons that we wrote the book was to try to help people understand what it's like to be a true citizen soldier. And there's about 19,000 people that serve in the National Guard today, just in Pennsylvania. And we serve right along the active duty counterparts. We put on real uniforms and we get the training, and then when we come home, we go back and we do our regular jobs. So we go back and forth between military and civilian on a regular basis. It's different from the active duty because, of course, when you sign up and you go, they'll send you to a place far, far away. With us, we go back home and live our normal civilian lives when we're not in uniform.
And it's you said you put on the uniform, and from what I understand, when you've done 4 tours overseas in Operation Iraqi Freedom, Operation Enduring Freedom, and when you go, I mean, you've been a member of the Army and the Air National Guard, and when you deploy, you don't deploy as a Pennsylvania National Guardsman, you deploy as a member of the U.S. Army or the U.S. Air Force.
Well, we roll right in, and we're still members of the Pennsylvania National Guard, either the Army or the Air Force, but you would never know the difference if you see how we are in the uniforms and with the people that we serve. You know, our nameplates say U.S. Air Force, just like everybody else.
Like everyone else's.
Absolutely.
I want to read a portion of this, and in the very, very beginning, as you introduce it, your introduction is called, I Didn't Ask for This, and Susan, you wrote this portion. It's so well written. I just want to read a portion of this. You talked about the morning of September 11th, and you were at Kmart, and you said you were watching your son Will, and you're watching the TV as this unfolds, and I think all of us remember where we were that day. And you said, soon I watched this terrible event unfold long enough. I knew that my life had just changed drastically. Today I'd become a wartime military wife. Would Kevin be safe? Would he be homesick? Will he be near the action or away from the front lines? Will he be home in time for the new baby? What I didn't know and could not comprehend was that this new role as a wartime military wife would last 18 years. Kevin's temporary service as a National Guardsman would become a permanent obligation for our entire family. I didn't ask for this, but I accepted it, sometimes with grace and class and sometimes kicking and screaming. This is our account of how we built a marriage and raised 3 sons as a part-time military family in a permanent state of war. One of the things I loved about this book was just how open and authentic and honest it was, sometimes with grace and class, sometimes kicking and screaming. Take me back to that moment. I mean, you were in the Guard already, and so clearly you knew at some point watching events that morning that we were going to war and that Kevin was being called up. You said you couldn't imagine then that over the next 18, 20 years that this would be a permanent part of your family lifestyle. What did go through your mind in that moment?
In that moment, I thought, wow, our life is going to change forever, and it's going to change hopefully for the better. But the uncertainty was there. Would he be safe? As I wrote, would he be safe? Would he be okay? Would he be on the front line? Would he be in the back of the fight? But I did know that it was going to change our whole lifestyle, meaning that he would be gone. Mm-hmm. And that is different than 1 weekend a month and 30 days a year. That's a whole different concept of him actually leaving the country and not knowing where he's going. The second time he left, Kevin told me, he said, "Suze, I'm leaving. I can't tell you where I'm going. I can't tell you how long I'll be gone, and we'll have no contact the whole time I'm gone." That moment, I looked at him and said, okay, that's what you say as an Army wife or an Air Force wife. You just accept it and know that you're going to have to, for lack of a better word, buck up and take on the role of military family support of your own. You have to do it for yourself.
Wow. And Kevin, can I ask you the same question? What ran through your mind as you watched those events unfold? At what point did you realize my life's going to be pretty different?
Probably instantly. The timing of when I was going to go overseas was in question. I had just gotten back from Air Force Intelligence Officer School, so I was the rookie in the shop. Mm-hmm. In fact, at first, they told me that I would not go right away because they were going to send more experienced people, and I called Susan to tell her that, and she was relieved. I was disappointed because I wanted to get in the fight and take care of the terrorists. You know, I wasn't foolhardy about it, but that's why I had enlisted. That's what I had trained for. That changed a couple days later. I called Susan up and said, "Pack my bags, please. I'm coming home, and I leave tomorrow." And she did. She went out and helped me get ready because I had to leave in the morning, and my whole family came over, and we still hadn't even met the neighbors yet at that time. We had just moved into a new house, and you know, the morning I was leaving, the neighbor from across the street walked across with a bag of red beets, and I was kissing her goodbye to head away to the first time I ever went off to war, and the neighbor said, "Hey, I'm Dave, do you want some red beets?" And we were trying to be polite, but it was all these crazy instances that someone on active duty would never experience that became routine in our life. And Dave became a wonderful friend, but you know, that's how she got by when I was gone.
Red beets. Kevin, you write in the book, you said, "I figured the Guard would let me have the best of both worlds, military and civilian, just like the TV commercials. How hard could it be?" The next chapter of your book is entitled Guardsman's Whiplash.
Right, so that's a term, I don't know if we heard it somewhere or if we came up with it ourselves, but you know, when you're in the Guard, you have the uniform on one moment, and then you're back in your regular job the next. Mm-hmm. You're dealing with family issues 1 minute, you're fighting a war the next, and that's what we meant by Guardsman Whiplash. And it didn't just affect the soldier and the airman, it affects your family. And we had some experiences that, you know, were pretty strange, you know, going from one thing to another very quickly. Yeah.
Susan, can I ask you, I mean, you were at home, you raised 3 kids, you have a business, Dellicker Strategies. You were integral at the start of this business. You yourself, incredibly accomplished. You're a Fulbright scholar. You're now a teacher. What's the effect of this guardsman whiplash on you and on the family?
It's a stressor. It's a true stressor on the family. When Kevin is gone, I kind of take over and play the role of mother and father, for lack of a better term. And that means I do all the planning, I do all the cooking, I do all the cleaning, and I also try to run the business as well as I could. That said, he returns and then suddenly he wants to get his 2 cents into the fray. And unfortunately, I've been doing it for however many months he's been gone, and I'm not real happy about that. And that tension comes out sometimes.
And we learned to get better at this over time. I remember one deployment, and when I rushed home to try to be there in time to put Jake on the school bus for his first day of kindergarten, and all we did was fight, and it was for that very reason. And you have to learn how to cope. You have to learn how to, thrive in a very stressful environment, and it's a lesson that every guardsman has to go through. I suppose the active duty does too, but it's different when you don't have that, military base surrounding you when you're gone. We've been blessed with amazing family and friend support network, and I think most veterans in this country would say that the level of support that we get from our friends and neighbors is incredible. But in the end, when the doors close and Susie's got 3 kids at home, she's doing the work and worrying about me at the same time.
Yeah. The question for both of you, where you are now, looking back, what would you have said to yourself 20 years ago when you joined, or when that occurred on September 11th? What would you have said to yourself 20 years ago?
I would have said, be brave. It was an adventure. Our whole life has been an adventure. And you have to enjoy it, as well as hard as it is, you still have to enjoy it.
Yeah, Susie always kept her sense of humor. I remember it started to get normal when I came home from that second deployment, and Susan said, Kevin, I'm going out tonight. I'm not telling you where I'm going. I don't know how long I'll be gone, and we won't have any contact when I'm gone. And I thought, okay, touche, I deserve that. But you get used to it. And, in a sense, the military asks us all to be superheroes, sure, and we do our best to comply. But that's hard sometimes. Okay.
Kevin, you said when you joined, you thought it was the best of both worlds. Do you still think that?
It's been an incredible experience. It really has. It's been an honor. And the idea of the citizen soldier, which is older than our country itself, in many ways it's unique to the United States. This concept that you can train and become proficient in military art, and when you're needed, your country calls you up, you take off your suit and you put on your military uniform, you go do your job, and then you go return home to your community. It's the classic ideal of what it means, in my opinion, to be an American, and I've been able to live it. I've been able to thrive, and whether Susan liked it or not, she learned to be a part of it too. And I think our whole family was better off for it.
Yeah. We're going to cut the break. When we come back, I want to talk about some of the challenges that guardsmen families face and what solutions there might be for that.
Absolutely.
Don't go away. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Face the Issues. Kevin, Susan, thank you again for being here. I want to talk about the support system and National Guard families. This takes up a really big portion of your book, and really what you've written here is telling people what life is like, not so much, I should say, as a guardsman overseas, but as a family here. Kevin, you've said a lot that serving is a family thing, that you're the one that went overseas, but if it wasn't for Susan and the boys, you wouldn't be able to do that. And yet you've talked extensively about a lack of support for Guard families. Some of it attributed to what you said earlier, that there's a differential between guardsmen and reservists and active duty that we often don't understand. But you've talked about this support system, not that it's absent, but that's insufficient. Can you explain what you mean by that?
It's different. When you're on active duty, meaning you're a full-time Army soldier or a full-time airman, you live on a base, and you're surrounded by a whole bunch of people that are in the same situation. You're in a unit, and when you deploy, you probably go together, although not always, but often. And there's buildings full of people that are there to support the families that are left behind when that soldier or airman goes overseas. So if you need somebody to walk your dog, they're right there. If you need to get mental health services, they're right there on base. If you need to have somebody take care of your kids for an evening while you go do something, they're right there. Friends and family in the same situation because their spouses are all overseas and everybody takes care of each other. When you're in the Guard, you're isolated and you live out in a neighborhood somewhere, and when your husband or wife deploys, your neighbors might not even know that they're gone. And if they call you to a meeting, for example, it might be very far away from where you live, because in the Guard, a lot of times where you work is different from where you live.
Sure. What was that like for you, Susan, with this support system? You guys live in Lehigh County. Where would you have to go if there was a family support meeting?
There was a family support meeting in Harrisburg that I was often invited to at the base where Kevin was serving. That was 86 miles from our house, and it was at 7 o'clock in the evening. I had 2 small children at the time whose bedtime was 7 o'clock, so going to a family support meeting was almost an impossibility.
Yeah. And Kevin, toward that end, how does the Guard do better with this?
Well, there's really 3 issues in the family support infrastructure, and it's really not the Guard's fault. I think they need to, get more flexibility from, the Pentagon in terms of how they administer these programs. So the first issue is resources. I always would bring people into my Guard base and introduce them to the family support person, one person, and they would be shocked because they have a whole bunch of people that would do the same job, and there was always issues of short staffing and just not enough to go around to the hundreds, if not thousands, of people that they were expected to support. The second thing was the way it was structured. I talked already about how sometimes you live in a different place where you go to work. The other problem is that the Army and the Air Force don't have institutional connections that allow you to receive support from the opposite service. So for example, there's an Army National Guard unit right here in Allentown that could conceivably provide services to somebody who's in the Air Force based out of Harrisburg. But those connections are all ad hoc. They're not institutionalized yet, and those are the types of things that we can build, and they don't necessarily have to cost any money.
Sure.
The other thing is to provide more flexibility to the states and the units to be able to deliver family support the way they need it. Right now, a lot of this stuff has strings attached. Even if there is money available, it's to administer some program that's more suited to an active duty service member, and they don't really understand the Guard, so they should let the Guard do it themselves. The Pennsylvania Air National Guard and the Pennsylvania Army National Guard are actually doing a very, very good job of recognizing this issue and improving it. It's really a national problem that the family support infrastructure just has not yet caught up to what they're asking all the Guardsmen to do.
Sure. And this is different if you were active duty.
Absolutely. If you're on active duty, you're receiving those services right at the base where you live, and it's a much more robust system.
And also just the structure of, you said earlier, the families are all there. And so it's even like if you're away and you need someone to watch the kids, your next door neighbor's in the same situation. And that's just not true where you live, hence your neighbor Dave and the red beets.
Exactly.
Susan, let me ask you, you're the one that holds the house down and when Kevin's away, probably when Kevin's here too. But what would you like to see different in the support that you and other people in your situation get?
Well, Kevin has already identified the fact that I would like to see the services to be received at a base that was closest to your home as opposed to the base where he's serving at the time. That would make it a lot more convenient, obviously, for the families. It would also alleviate necessarily relying on family and friends all the time. I was very lucky. I had a strong support system every time he left. Both of our families and our neighbors and friends were very supportive.
Yeah.
But it's important to note that we're not trying to portray Guard families as victims.
Right.
I mean, it's an honor to serve, and the support that we get from our friends and neighbors, not just us, but people that I know all throughout the Guard say the same thing. It's incredible. It's just that institutionally, they need to catch up to how they're actually using the Guard and Reserve and make sure that they're not just supporting the troops, but they're also helping the families do the things that they need to do when they're making these demands of these troops.
And to your point, the National Guard, at least here in Pennsylvania, is doing what they can with the resources they have. It's just that their resources are limited.
They always do. They do an amazing job with limited resources, time and time again. And they're called to do so many different things. We fight wars overseas. We get called up when there's a flood and a hurricane. We were activated for a COVID response. There's places around the country where they call up guardsmen to go drive school buses when they don't have enough drivers. Some of these things are starting to get into territory where we have to start to question, is this really appropriate use of the Guard? But mostly what we were talking about in the book is, how do you make sure that you provide resources to the whole family and not just pinpointed towards the member? Because we do our jobs too, but they bear the brunt of it.
Sure. Obviously, these are changes that will take time. You have to go through the government. They have to go through the process and protocol that we're all familiar and probably frustrated with. You talked about your family and friends stepping up. What can the community do? Friends, neighbors, church community, what can they do to step up in the absence of these structural changes?
The first thing they can do is pray, Sam. We need prayers more than anything, both for our member as well as for the families. Beyond that, they can just be aware that we might need an extra hand once in a while. That might be a dinner once in a while, it might be childcare, it might be just a friendly word, a call to make sure that everything's okay. Beyond that, there's the occasional, every time he went away, I have to say that the refrigerator would break down or the heating system. So even a network of having good repairmen available, or if someone can give you that information, is a good thing that the community can do.
Yeah.
I think it's really important for people to be informed. They need to know what the Guard is, who their neighbors are that are in it, and they need to understand, the basics of what they're going through. This isn't a, weekend warrior job anymore. It's not 1 weekend a month, 2 weeks a year like those commercials from the 1980s. I mean, it's a true commitment, and people are in and out of active duty constantly, on training exercises. They're going on real-world missions. They're doing all sorts of things, and the demands on their time can be intense. And the title, 20% Soldiers, represents the amount of time that I've spent on some kind of military status since Susan and I have been married. So essentially 1 out of every 5 days, I'm doing something related to my National Guard service. And most of my friends and neighbors never see me in uniform. So it's out of sight, out of mind. And again, I'm not asking for their sympathy, but when they see that guy show up at the baseball game and he's in uniform and he's in a rush and he's you're wondering what he's doing, talk to him or her and find out, is there anything I can help you with? Because he probably's not going to ask.
Well, great advice. So thank you again for sharing that journey with us. When we come back, I'm going to ask what advice you have for others who are families of the National Guard. And so don't go away. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Face the Issues. Susan, Kevin, thank you again for being with me and for sharing this. We've had a serious conversation. Your book is full of little anecdotes that are also humorous. There's a bit about where you talk about your son Jake and where you thought he was vaping, and it turned out to just be something for his bike. I remember reading that segment and just laughing for a good few minutes, and just all the ups and downs. It really feels, when you read the book, like you're sitting at the coffee shop with the both of you and just hearing that story. I felt like I was in the room as a lot of these things happened. And so I just want to say thank you for sharing that journey. I want to ask you as we close, there are so many families out there that are in the same place that I'm sure if they picked up your book, it would feel like a good friend that understands them. Both of you talked about the reality of not having people around you that understood what you were going through. What advice do you give to families? Susan, specifically for you, what advice do you give to other families in the position that you were in? And Kevin, what advice do you give to guardsmen and guardswomen who are leaving about their families? And so Susan, let's start with you.
The first thing I tell them is they're not alone. Their situation is not unique. There are others of us out there, and we're not just surviving, we're thriving. And that they need to also move forward with their lives, and that they can find support with the other guardsmen in the country.
Being in the Guard for us, and I think Susan would agree, has really been a blessing. Yes, it's been extremely challenging. There were times when we were about to call it quits because it seemed like it was becoming overwhelming. But in the end, it's just been an amazing blessing to be a part of this institution. Would have do it all over again. We presented the book to a conference of military leaders just a week ago, and afterwards a couple of them came up to us and said, "Oh, you told our story." That's what we wanted. We want people to understand that, you know, there are other people that do this, thousands of them. We get through it, and we're better for it. You know, just like Susan said, don't just survive, but thrive. And that's been really the best experience, trying to just reassure people that you don't have to be a superhero to be in the Guard, even though it seems like it when they ask you to just do more and more all the time. But you know, you can be ordinary Americans who love your country and love your community and want to serve your fellow human beings. And you know, it's a really neat lifestyle that we've been able to do together.
Well, thank you for writing the book and for sharing your story with us today, and for your service, for both of you, and to your families for your service.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That is our show tonight. I want to thank Susan and Kevin Dellicker for joining me. Again, the book is 20% Soldiers, Our Secret Life in the National Guard. And thank you for joining us today, and we hope you'll join us again right here next week. Until then, my name is Sam Chen. On behalf of all of us here at Face the Issues, thank you and good night.